I strategic vision, America first and national priorities. At the core of Trump's current strategic framework is a philosophy centered on what he calls America first, in both domestic and international arenas. This doctrine emphasizes national sovereignty, economic self-reliance, security dominance, and cultural conservatism. The administration's public agenda explicitly lists these priorities as shaping national strategy across government functions. Key pillars of this vision include securing borders and internal safety, boosting domestic energy and industrial strength, reducing federal bureaucracy, protecting constitutional freedoms and traditional values, shifting U.S. global engagement from alliance dependency to transactional cooperation. This ideological baseline frames how policies are crafted and prioritized across sectors. 2. Domestic policy strategies. 1. Immigration and border security. Immigration remains one of the most aggressive and clear-cut elements of Trump's agenda. Targeted strategic actions, mass deportations. The administration aims to carry out what it describes as the largest deportation effort in U.S. history, prioritizing removal of undocumented immigrants. Border security construction, renewed emphasis on completing physical barriers at the southern border, expanding enforcement capacity, and deploying military forces to support border agents. Policy changes on citizenship. There are directives under consideration to reinterpret provisions of U.S. citizenship law to limit automatic birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants. Cartel designation. The administration is pursuing legal tools to label drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations, to disrupt transnational criminal networks and use broader tools against them. These strategic actions reflect a multi-layered approach that blends law enforcement, legal reinterpretation, and diplomatic pressure on transit countries. 2. Economic strategy. Jobs, inflation, and manufacturing. Trump's economic policy framework centers on growth driven by deregulation, tax cuts, protectionism, and Made in America industrial rebuilding. Core elements. Tax policy. The administration advocates large tax cuts for workers and businesses, making prior tax reforms permanent and simplifying the tax code to boost economic growth. Manufacturing and reshoring. A strategic emphasis is placed on making the United States a manufacturing superpower, including incentives for domestic production and supply chain security initiatives. Trade stance and tariffs. Protectionist measures such as additional tariffs on imports, especially from China, are intended to reduce trade deficits and strengthen U.S. industry, though they raise concerns about inflationary pressures and trade retaliation. Mar-a-Lago Accord. A proposed economic framework seeks to address structural trade imbalances by combining tariff tools with potential currency policy shifts to weaken persistent deficits. Inflation and cost of living. Reducing inflation remains a stated goal through deregulation and enhanced domestic energy production, underpinned by corporate tax cuts and regulatory simplification. Housing and consumer policy. The administration has launched proposals aimed at lowering mortgage rates and credit costs, including federal purchases of mortgage bonds and capping credit card interest rates, to improve housing affordability. Taken together, these policies aim for a robust economic boom by turbocharging production, cutting red tape, and rebalancing global trade relationships. 3. Energy and climate strategy. Trump's energy strategy seeks to make the United States the dominant energy producer in the world and reverse prior climate commitments that he argues weaken American competitiveness. Key plans. Energy independence. Policies focus on expanding fossil fuel production, lifting federal restrictions on drilling, and streamlining permitting processes. Paris Agreement. The U.S. has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Accord under Trump, rejecting binding international emissions goals. Climate deregulation. A vigorous rollback of climate and environmental regulation, including reducing constraints on coal, oil, and gas sectors, aims to lower consumer energy costs and create jobs. Critics argue these policies risk exacerbating environmental degradation and long-term climate risks. But strategic emphasis remains on energy dominance as a national economic and security priority. 4. Government reform and bureaucratic restructuring. Trump's strategy for government reform involves reducing the size, influence, and regulatory output of the federal bureaucracy. Notable initiatives. Department of Government Efficiency. DOGE, an executive restructuring effort designed to streamline federal agency operations, cut regulations, and increase productivity by using oversight mechanisms and technological tools. Regulatory rollbacks. The administration has mandated sweeping deregulation across multiple sectors, pushing for the removal of what it labels burdensome regulations, hindering economic performance. Civil service accountability. Measures include hiring freezes outside essential roles, eliminating perceived ideological biases, and expanding executive authority over federal workers. This reflects a broader aim to reshape the federal government into a leaner, more responsive structure aligned with executive priorities. 5. Social policy and cultural agenda. Trump's strategic domestic agenda includes explicit cultural and social priorities. Education reform. Use federal funding to influence school policies. Abolish tenure in favor of merit compensation for teachers, and oppose critical race theory and gender ideology in schools. Civil rights and freedom focus. Strengthening constitutional freedoms like free speech, religion, and gun rights are repeatedly highlighted. Sports and gender policies. Policies aim explicitly to keep men out of women's sports and restrict certain transgender participation in federal programs. Patriotic emphasis. Rebuilding national pride through renaming landmarks and prioritizing traditional historical narratives in public institutions. These elements form a cultural strategy designed to appeal to conservative constituencies and assert traditional values in public. Policy 3. Defense security and strategic posture. 1. National security strategy. Trump's national security strategy represents a significant shift from past U.S. doctrines by focusing on deterring Chinese power, defending the homeland, and reducing reliance on traditional alliances, while demanding greater burden sharing. Primary features. Homeland defense, prioritization. The strategy emphasizes defending U.S. territory and American interests rather than widespread global interventionism. China as primary strategic competitor. The Indo-Pacific is framed as a central theater for deterrence and influence, with calls for allies to invest more in their own security. Military modernization. Plans to enhance nuclear, aerospace, cyber, and advanced weapon systems are major components. Allies and burden sharing. Traditional allies, for example, NATO, are encouraged to invest more in their defense rather than relying on U.S. forces. This strategy is less focused on ideological promotion and more on strategic deterrence, strength, and realism. 2. Advanced defense projects. Trump has prioritized ambitious defense initiatives such as National Missile Defense, Golden Dome Missile Defense Shield, a multi-layer defense network designed to protect the U.S. from ballistic, hypersonic, and space-launched threats. Efforts include satellites, land-based interceptors, and advanced radar systems. Space and deterrence strategy. The Golden Dome project and expanded Space Force budget signify a shift toward space-oriented defense capabilities and strategic leverage beyond Earth's surface. 3. Operations and force posture. Recent developments indicate active strategic posture. U.S. naval deployments to Middle East aircraft carrier strike group movements reflect heightened regional readiness amid tensions with Iran. These moves underscore the strategic emphasis on deterrence and readiness to respond to emerging threats. 4. Foreign policy direction. 1. Trade and economic diplomacy. Trump's strategic foreign policy mixes protectionist trade measures with attempts to reshape global economic relationships, tariffs and nation-centric trade. Higher tariffs are intended to protect U.S. jobs, but risk trade tensions and retaliation. Mar-a-Lago Accord, a broader economic framework involving structural currency and trade reforms to address global imbalances. 2. Middle East and regional strategy. Trump's approach to the Middle East combines security cooperation with controversial proposals. Support for Israel. Strategic alignment and defense ties with Israel remain strong, framing it as a model ally. Gaza strategy proposals. There have been discussions around U.S. administrative control or restructuring of Gaza in pursuit of stability, a highly controversial plan with mixed international reception. 3. Latin America and Hemisphere policy. The administration is pursuing a more assertive posture in the Western Hemisphere, exemplified by operations targeting transnational criminal networks and potential influence in regional politics. 4. Strategic sovereignty moves. Geopolitical maneuvers such as discussions over U.S. strategic access to Arctic locations, for example, Greenland frameworks illustrate attempts to counter rival powers like Russia and China. Longer-term strategy and vision. Trump's strategy aims not only at immediate policy outcomes but at transforming the U.S. strategic footprint globally. Less reliance on traditional alliances, more transactional partnerships. Focus on American industrial capacity and defense dominance. Shifting global economic rules through tariffs and currency considerations. Expanding defense into new domains, space, hypersonics, assertive use of executive authority on immigration, governance, and social policy. Key strategic challenges and critiques. While Trump's strategies reflect coherent priorities, analysts and critics note tensions and risks. Trade tensions from tariffs could provoke retaliation and inflationary shocks. Deregulation and environmental rollbacks may accelerate climate impacts. Shifting alliance paradigms may weaken collective security frameworks. Social policy emphasis can deepen domestic polarization. These challenges suggest that execution and global responses will significantly shape outcomes. Conclusion. Donald Trump's current strategic plans and policy priorities, rooted in America First doctrine, span immigration enforcement, economic nationalism, defense modernization, energy dominance, social conservatism, and a transactional foreign policy. Across these domains, the emphasis is on national sovereignty, economic self-reliance, robust defense, and cultural conservatism. Whether these strategies will achieve long-term stability and prosperity depends on implementation, reaction from global partners, and domestic political dynamics.